Hey everyone, the Generative AI News Rundown is back, and we have big news today from NVIDIA. Databricks just pulled in a pile of cash. We've got news from Salesforce with new copilots. We have news from Adobe with Firefly, Roblox as well, so much more. Thanks for joining us again for the live showing of the Generative AI News Rundown. Okay, this is Brett Kinsella. I am here with my colleague, Eric Schwartz. How you doing, Eric?
Doing well. Excited to get into it.
Okay, so I wrote about the not so slow summer, and what we've done is we picked up even more activity coming up based on really big names making big moves, plus a lot of names I think that people won't be familiar with, really starting to get on the stage. And so I think we should get right into it. Hey, folks, if you're out there, just give us a like on LinkedIn and YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And just drop a comment in there. Let us know you're here. It looks like Bali Shetty is one of the first ones in. Thanks a lot for being here with us today. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about, top story of the week. NVIDIA, they're going to show up a few times this week in our stories. But the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that they've essentially doubled the performance of what is the industry leading chip today. Now, these are what NVIDIA winds up doing is comparing themselves against themselves because they basically have the A100 and the H100 are sort of the top performing. And they said the A100 and then it was a 4x improvement when they moved to the H100. And then they came out with Tensor LLM, which is basically a software enhancement to the H100 NVIDIA chip, and it doubled it again. They also had some pretty interesting benchmarks against against the GPU competitors, which I think is really interesting because we hear that Google has a TPU, and Amazon, for example, has a couple of GPU and some CPU-based chips that they're using for AI training. But a lot of people talk about throughput, total cost of ownership, all those things, and you can see why. Eric, what do you make of the story?
I mean, it's the story of generative AI could have its own spin-off called the NVIDIA story, because how much of what we talk about connects back to what NVIDIA is doing, and this just shows that NVIDIA is not only well ahead of any potential competitor, but also that they're really not resting on their laurels in that regard. They're still keen to stay ahead of the curve. I think they know that if some of their rivals could get ahead of them, they would. So they're not going to just say, well, we're so far ahead, we may as well make as much money as we can from this without spending on the next step.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing how central that they become, and how I think that from a generative AI standpoint, they're almost certainly they're going to be more than half of all the spending in the space. That includes software, everything else, cloud providers. It's going to go to them. So I think that's pretty fascinating. Now, we did gain last week on Friday. Normally you do it on Thursdays like this week. And it was right after a briefing by NVIDIA, which was embargoed. So we couldn't actually talk about all these things. We just said, hey, some things are coming. But they gave us a private briefing ahead of time with a few other folks. And we had the news come out. We actually had two stories come out. And one was about some of the chip updates as well.
Yeah, it's, again, talking about what they're working on. They're putting a lot of work into not only making the chips better, but also the software that runs on the chips better. They're aiming to enhance not just the speed, but also just general efficiency of these chips. And when they perform these tests, as you said, they're comparing themselves against themselves, because there's not really much in the way of other comparable chips. I mean, it's certainly not in the available publicly. I mean, who knows what's going on in secret government labs. But in terms of what businesses and consumers have access to, the story is just which version of NVIDIA's chips are you going to use, not so much what other companies are you going to aim for if you're involved in generative AI.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of other stories out about how NVIDIA is actually reshaping the cloud market. So some people know about DGX, which is their own cloud, somewhat hosted by them. They've got a new version of it. It's going to be hosted within Google Cloud. I think some of it's actually hosted on Azure as well. But the idea there is they have access to the latest chips. So the H100s, the GH100s are coming out. Well, they're doing formal announcements. I don't think it's released this coming quarter. I think it's the quarter after. But the Grace Hopper chips are supposed to be even much better, and they're creating the situation where companies like CoreWeave are new cloud competitors just because they're specialists who just have GPUs. Well, they have CPUs too, but they're just for AI workloads primarily. And because they have availability, people are piling in and starting to use those as an alternative to Google, Microsoft, and AWS. And so that's a really thing. We talk about sort of the LLM wars as proxy battles for the AI wars, but we've got this other thing around the chips, which is really important. Now there's scarcity now. I don't think there'll be scarcity indefinitely. There's definitely people who are building new and better chips, and at some point we're going to get to a good enough level where the second tier players are good enough to do most of what we want them to do. And even if NVIDIA still has a lead, it won't be as big of an advantage. But you had another story that I thought was worth bringing up, and I wonder if it's related to the story we're just talking about with NVIDIA. Generative AI gives global semiconductor revenue a lift after more than a year of declines.
Yeah. The pandemic and the supply chain issues affected everything, and semiconductors is very much a part of that story. But even in the last year, there's been drops in how much revenue is coming in when it comes to semiconductors, and that's changed. And according to the analysts, it's very much the story of generative AI making bringing up the value of semiconductors, pushing investment, and really changing the game in that industry. And as with generative AI chips, it's also a question of NVIDIA. It's NVIDIA pushing semiconductor sales, which in turn is lifting the entire industry. So it's not insignificant. NVIDIA had 47.5% of the revenue surge, so it's a little less than half. So yeah, it's the story of an industry improvement is really a story of NVIDIA raking in the cash.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is obviously there's pent up demand from chip shortages the last couple of years, and we're starting to get more production capacity online, and sorting out some of the supply chain problems that they had. But then you also have this big drive in AI. But actually, when you look at that chart that we just pulled up, it doesn't look like that big of a bump. We think about all these sales and what NVIDIA just did and that type of thing. It just puts it in perspective of how large the semiconductor market is. Now there's so many things that are not AI chips, and so you can double, triple, quadruple the AI chip or the GPU sales, and it's still just an incremental lift on the existing market, which is like an enormous market.
Yeah, I mean, it's also there's also been a shift. I mean, it's not necessarily a major factor in this per se, but a lot more reusing or repurposing existing chips. I mean, you hear stories about cars that are being sent off to the junkyard. There's a lot of stripping of them, of their semiconductors, of their chips before they're compacted, because they're still valuable, still useful, even if they're redone or remade.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so hey, everybody out there. This is Brett Kinsella. I'm the founder of VoiceBot.ai and Synthedia. And we have Eric Schwartz, head writer of VoiceBot.ai, with me today. As we do this every week, we break down the top generative AI stories of the week. NVIDIA had a couple of big news announcements. We did another story, which I thought we would break into for just a moment, that I thought would be interesting. Oh, by the way, if you're out there, give us a like on LinkedIn, give us a like on YouTube. We'd really appreciate that. Subscribe to YouTube if you want to see the recording afterwards. Go do that too as well. And let us know you're here. Just drop a comment in so that we know you're there. Add comments, add questions. You're definitely welcome to do that. So the story that you talked about here, or that we want to talk about here, is related to a lot of the market data reporting that we've been doing, and it's what jobs are most at risk from generative AI automation. I think this is a Forrester report.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about what they found here, and when we think about generative, what is it that is going on here? Is this a like a white collar Armageddon? What are we seeing?
Well, there could, because there's two uh, elements to this, which is that generative AI is definitely changing a lot of jobs, and in some cases, yes, that does mean replacing people, automating existing positions. But a lot of it is also just about changing how the job is performed, or augmenting what someone does in their job to make them more productive or more efficient in some way. And so that's what makes this chart, I think, particularly useful, or certainly interesting. And when it comes to, and as you say, it's not necessarily a white collar Armageddon, but jobs that are involve creating content, creating text that is very specific, very technical. I mean, literally technical writers, or about and proofreaders, and in this case, social science research assistants, where it's a lot of what honestly I would refer to as somewhat tedious formatting and adjusting of style, rather than a more creative, or designing science experiments, or writing creatively. So there's a lot of potential replacement there. But even in that regard, there's Forrester doesn't think it's going to upend the entire job market the way some of the other forecasts have. They're projecting 2.5 million jobs replaced, which is not nothing, but is not 30 million as some of the other forecasts say. So there's a lot more change coming than there is replacement, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting idea, that we're talking about this idea of whether generative AI is going to replace you, or it's going to be someone using generative AI, which is going to replace you. And there's just like this, these jobs aren't going away. Some of them might be, to the extent that we're already at capacity. It's as much as anybody ever wanted to do. And now you need fewer people going forward. But it is all of these things. And there's just like real focus on large language models. I know we've talked a lot about image models, video models, all these things, but the large language models are the more impactful productivity element right now. And you just see anybody who works with words, interpreting words, those types of things. There was another one on here though that I thought was interesting. Statistical assistants. I didn't know this was a job. Like, I knew an archivist, and like whether they go away or not, paralegals, I don't know. But statistical assistants was something up there, because I don't think of them as being people who write. And there was another one on there. I think wasn't there one that said historians as well?
Yeah.
Like, historians are going away. Like, why would historians go away? Just because information is out there doesn't mean the chat bots can actually interpret that properly. And by the way, we need historians to create the content in context in order to write the histories that the generative AI models can use later.
Yeah, and I think, maybe because this was produced presumably by people involved in the social sciences, they talk about social science research assistants being replaced, not social scientists, because again, obviously, creating experiments and studies and interpreting them, that is not something generative AI can do. That requires humans. And the same, I think, goes for historians, where it's not so much that someone doing research on history will be replaced by an AI, but that they'll definitely, that a sort of higher up historian may not need as much research help combing through certainly electronic archives to figure out what's been written before, where there's information on certain subjects. So I think that's why it's it's lower down in terms of being automated, but certainly right almost in the middle in terms of how it will change what they do, and for better and possibly not necessarily the best, depending on how it changes the training, I would say, for that job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess for clarification, statisticians and statistical assistants were both listed. And I think some of that, if people have looked at or used Code Interpreter, which is now Advanced Analytics, I think, and ChatGPT, you might understand that, oh, okay, some of these jobs are getting easier. I think that a lot of people would think of that as like, data scientists, maybe some of their jobs are being automated away. It doesn't strike me that we're going to have a abundance of data scientists anytime soon, because we actually have quite a shortfall in that in that area right now today. Okay, so that's interesting. I thought we'll track that over time in terms of jobs, what actually happens, and are people focused on the right things? But yeah, sure. Anybody that works with words or code, like anything that's written, their job is going to change, and I think they're going to be using these tools pretty extensively. All right, so our next segment is let's go into the funding fountain, because hey, there's always a lot of funding going on in this space. It's amazing, and our top story could be Databricks. We'll talk about that in a moment, but I wanted to talk first about Imbue. So you wrote about this. I did as well. They raised $200 million to build foundation models at reason. They were doing something a little bit different about a year ago. Yeah, about a year ago. This time, they were actually interpreting 3D worlds and doing all these other things. Still using AI and models in order to interpret space. But I think about 9 months ago, they shifted to this, and maybe it was a little bit longer than that. But this idea of reasoning, and one of the things that they're really focused on is if you can build reasoning in so that you have a bot using a foundation model that sort of acts or can interpret things like a human, then you can actually build assistants that do really interesting things for you. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think we've talked about there's as understanding of generative AI expands, there's a lot more interest in the fundamentals or the infrastructure surrounding it on various levels, and this is absolutely part of that. It's can you build or can you break down it and create the component of logic, of reason for an AI, and if you can do that, then obviously building more powerful generative AI tools, it becomes a lot easier, and that's where Imbue is really interested in. And so they're looking at the most logical things like coding, like basic reasoning, deductive and inductive reasoning. And I think that if they're able to accomplish it and say that we have a model that will reliably, consistently reason out answers to questions or things like that, or write code that is always, if not perfect, then at least logical, then they're going to have a lot of customers coming to their door.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is Dave Garbino's in the audience today, and he'll know that we've been talking about this for a long time. In fact, I think I've talked to him about this at one point, and at least in social media exchanges, maybe live. But this is about this idea of assistants with agency. So we have these assistants, we have these different models, the assistant sitting across the table from you. So that's like Siri or Alexa. They're just like, they're not on your side. They're like a service. It's like a service counter for you. You ask them to do something, they hand it across the table to you. And then we get into this idea of copilots, and we always think about them as on the same side of the table as us. They're our collaborator. They're maybe suggesting things to us. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But they, certainly are helping us reach a shared goal. They're doing a little bit, we're doing a little bit, but they don't really do that much on their own. We have to be requested, or there has to be some sort of programming which asks them to go out and get some things. But then we have this idea of assistants with agency, and those are agents that represent us in the world, and they can do things for us on our behalf even when we're not there. And I think that that's the thing that actually makes me most interested about Imbue, because that's really what they're focused on. And there's been a lot of people who have built voice assistants, for example, or other type of chat assistants, even ChatGPT, which have thought about this. But I think unless you focus on it, unless you focus on this idea that reasoning is required, because you have to be able to act like a human when you're out in the world, and unless you focus on somehow building that into an agent that can work for you, that I don't think it's going to get there, because everybody who does other things primarily and thinks about agents secondarily, they're just always busy building out features for their primary service, and they never really get to the agent thing and the reasoning thing, which takes a lot more effort. There's just a lot of focus. These are tough problems.
Yeah, I think as I said, that these ideas of foundation models and of the sort of basic level of understanding how these AI function, what can be done to make them better, and again, addressing these core issues of things like hallucinations and safety protocols, like anything that can be done to make that process better, or make them better at avoiding hallucinations and improper responses, is going to be very valuable to the industry as a whole.
Absolutely. Okay, let's keep going. Imbue, $200 million, by the way. OpenAI participated in their funding last fall. So OpenAI really sees some value there. I think they were part of this one as well in a smaller part. But $200 million, it's a good chunk of change. What they're doing though is a big challenge. So if they make progress on it, you should expect to see them raising more than that in their next round. Okay, so the next story, this just broke a couple hours ago. Databricks raised, I think they called a Series I investment. Yes, that's what that is. They just raised $500 million, $500 million, and a $43 billion valuation. A couple of things that I thought were particularly interesting. Those of you who've been following the Databricks saga a little bit, the information likes to write about this, and time to time they seem to get a lot of rumors out of there. They were talking about the fact that they burned about $430 million last year. Burned means they had more costs than they had revenue, of $430 million. And over the next 2 years, they're expecting it to be another $900 million. So 450, call it 450 a year. So, we're talking about, a billion and a half maybe in total burn over a 3-year period. And they're like, oh, this is unusual. This is a different strategy than everyone else. No, it's not. This is exactly what everybody's doing. What they're doing is they're trying to get market position, build the product that's going to kill everybody else, make sure they capture as many customers as possible, and have enough cash to fund all of that, not just training and building of product, but also all that cash that they need in order to acquire new customers. Now, a couple of interesting side notes here. Maybe they're not even side notes. Databricks said in their announcement that they had just passed 1.5 billion in annual run rate for the next 12 months. Actually, information thinks they're going to do even 1.5 billion this year through January. I'm not sure about that. I'll just go with the fact that they're looking at 1.5 billion through the end of next summer. And that's 50% year over year revenue growth. What else do we have? Over 10,000 customers. And interestingly, they said over 300 of those customers are on pace to do 300 of those do more than $1 million in revenue over the next year. So a lot of people are like, burn, you're spending all this money. But actually, once they turn on the spigot, once we see this rush of companies adopting, the cash flows in if there's strong demand. And in this market, it appears there is, particularly for something like Databricks, where they're such a central player and the data side. And generative AI, if it's not about data, what is it about?
Yeah. And that's after they spent a 1.3 billion, although presumably not in cash, but $1.3 billion to buy Mosaic ML, which is a generative AI model company. So now not only can they provide so much of this data and interpretation, but they can actually funnel it through their own modeling and generative AI technology that they will have in-house to further attract customers and make them want to stay and spend even more on what Databricks has to offer. And
I've been thinking about Mosaic a little bit. Some people have asked me, like, who's the biggest winner so far? It's hard not to think of like OpenAI or something. It's clearly NVIDIA, but Mosaic ML might be the other one, right? Just getting scooped up for 1.3 billion, still early in their cycle and that type of thing. But there's another couple of things that I thought are interesting about that. So first of all, I don't think it was an all cash deal because they didn't have all cash. So probably an equity deal. So they got shares in Databricks as well. Databricks, since they acquired Mosaic ML, actually the valuation has risen. So in essence, as long as the valuation doesn't fall again, the founders of that company, the investors in that company, are probably getting more than the 1.3 billion that they paid out. The other thing too is you might sit around and think, well, do we need another foundation model out there? We've got a lot that are very capable. We've got more coming all the time. I mean, why spend this much? Why does Databricks want to do this? And it seems pretty strategic to me. I'm not sure how many people are going to adopt that. In the announcement and in an interview, the CEO of Databricks did talk about the fact that a lot of enterprises want to build their own models. And Mosaic ML is an open source model you can build on, and spread that. And there potentially is some convenience if you're a big Databricks user to have your data and your model all in the same place, or at least one of your customized models if you're going to be supporting multiple things. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. I mean, it's not a deep insight to say that the more integrated various facets of a business are, the better and the faster it'll perform, and the more efficient in terms of resources and time it'll be. And for companies, the kind of companies that are using Databricks, who have so much data, the idea that they don't have to bring their data elsewhere, or funnel it through an entirely different system, that so much of certainly the initial stages of building generative AI models and generative AI tools can be done right from their pre-existing Databricks interface, means that it's going to be the killer feature is going to be essentially you don't have to move to expand and improve what you're working on.
Yeah, another interesting sideline for those who like intrigue. Capital One is one of the investors in this round. NVIDIA and Capitol One sort of led the round. I don't know how much each put in. They didn't say, but let's say they're both over 100 million. Capital One is one of Snowflake's largest customers, and Snowflake just happens to be a competitor to Databricks. So we also have that going on. Not to say that Capital One's going to switch over. They probably are not. Like, all these companies want to have multiple irons in the fire, and there's a lot of times these strategic investments are separate. But it wouldn't surprise me to see a little bit of Databricks activity going on in Capital One. It just shows you how important that company is right now, or how important that company could become. And that's a big valuation, 43 billion. Okay, so maybe next round they will go IPO, but it's probably not a lot of pressure on that at the moment. Okay, we have more funding stories. You did a story on Enfabrica, and we're back to hardware. We were talking about chips. Now we're talking about networking hardware. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so this is part of what I was saying before about how the rapid adoption of generative AI as like a concept for businesses has pushed a lot of interest in the surrounding elements, including, in this case, hardware. And Fabrica, they build hardware and chipsets and things related to that are designed to speed up the movement of data, because, of course, when you're working with so much information, so much data, as in generative AI, speed is key. Latency is a big question for a lot of companies working with generative AI. So, in Fabrica, which has what they call the accelerated compute fabric switch, it's sort of a collection of networking chips. They say they can really speed up data transfer without hurting accuracy or hurting any of the other key metrics. So, they raised 125 million, which is a lot. Now their total is 148 million, which gives you an idea of how much enthusiasm there now is at this moment for what they're doing. And they're going to get a lot of new customers, and a lot of existing customers are going to up their use of the ACFS network of chips, because if they can be faster than their competitors, then they will win.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've got more funding stories. I think I might save one of them until next week, SQReam, if people have seen that. But I did think it would be worthwhile to talk about Druid. Maybe we'll come back to this one as well. But they raised 30 million. This is a conversational AI builder and interface. People will know companies in that space who follow it. It's just allowing companies to build chatbots more effectively using ChatGPT. I think the company really accelerated after they added that connector earlier this year. They're out of Romania, and they really weren't on a lot of people's radars. In fact, someone who's very prominent in that industry, I asked them when this news came out, I said, "What do you think of Druid?" And I think we'd heard about them. You and I talked about them like 6 months ago, and I think it was around one of their, it was like Texas Children's or Kmart, sort of one of their customer wins. And I was like, where did these guys come from? And maybe you wrote about them last year. I don't remember. But but I talked to like someone in the industry who's like runs a company in the space, and like never heard of them, right? And I'm like, oh, you should, because like they're coming for your customers.
Yeah, it's one of those. The idea of a businesses needing automated customer service agents. That's been something that we've been writing about nonstop for years now. But they were relatively quick on the Azure OpenAI partnership opportunities, and certainly within their industry, to get involved in that and to really see the possibilities for using ChatGPT's models to answer customer questions about more subjects of really opening up the throttle, I guess, on how ChatGPT can converse with potential customers, and not that they're not concerned about hallucinations and safety and things like that, but they found a way to keep that as a lesser concern when it comes to having a chatbot that can understand the sometimes complex questions that customers bring.
I think this is an enterprise story, but I'll just throw something else out there because everyone here is listening. I'll tell you, like, I have these private side conversations all the time. We're seeing conversational AI sort of generated interest. There's been a little bit of a stall. There's been some pilots using generative AI, and most of the enterprises are trying to figure out how they're going to absorb this, like which tools are they going to use, which workflows, how much they're going to fund of it, how they're going to do guardrails, what's their policy going to be. And so that's going to take a while. So a lot of these big conversational AI systems in enterprises are not just going to like magically appear because people are excited about the new technology, even if it is really effective. Those are just going to take time to adopt. However, I've heard from two separate companies, small businesses adopting generative AI at unprecedented rates. And a lot of that comes from this idea that we have the generative AI tools that can do summarization, they can do automatic FAQs, they can handle inbound queries more. Because what it does is it makes it possible for small businesses to actually have one of these capabilities and not have to manage it all the time. These small businesses just don't have IT staff, they don't have conversation designers, they just don't have a lot of extra people to be managing all the aspects of making the conversational AI capability effective. And generative AI skips a few of those steps. So it's really made it more effective for them right now. People are just like signing up and starting to pay for it, and they're getting immediate value. So that's the other like untold story. Maybe I'll try to delve into that, or we can delve into that over the next couple of months. And obviously Intuit's thinking about those types of things as well. But that's something to watch for, because I think it might be that we're seeing a revolution and nobody's noticing it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the concerns that some of the bigger companies may have about employing generative AI as a customer service assistant, in terms of, is it going to make a mistake? Is it going to offend people? For smaller companies, certainly ones that don't have like international customer bases, all you really need is sort of like that warning at the bottom saying like, oh, it may be wrong, or it may, there's not, it's still an experiment. Don't automatically trust it. And, they can avoid any of the, I guess, legal or other concerns they might have about employing the technology while still saving so much money and other resources by having that AI bot ready to go 24/7.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every week. We've done it for 31 or 32 weeks in a row now. We're talking about the top generative AI stories. We try to give you the story behind the story and some of these things, give you some context. And some people just watch this because it's too hard to keep up with reading all these articles every week. So they can just sit down, throw this on in the background, listen, and get caught up that way. And that's perfectly fine. If you are watching on LinkedIn or YouTube live, please give us a shout out. Let us know you're out there. Just make a little comment and give us a like if you get a chance. Smash that like button. And if you're on YouTube, please subscribe. All right. So I'm Brett Kinsella, founder of VoiceBot.ai and Synthesia. That is Eric Schwartz. He's the head writer at VoiceBot. He's written over 500, 600 articles on generative AI. And I think you're up around 2,500, maybe closer to 3,000 just in conversational AI, if you include conversational AI. So that's, we've been doing this a long time, folks. Okay. So that's the funding fountain. We've got more stories, but we'll save some for next week because there's just so much on that front. I did want to talk about what we call the product garden. So the fountain then lets us create all these new products. And Salesforce Einstein, I think, is an interesting story for a few different reasons. We'll talk about this a little bit more next week. So first of all, it's going to be semi-free. If you already have not a free plan, but one of their sort of mid-tier plans, you're going to get Einstein copilots for free. But there's some other things that are going on here that I think are really interesting. So first of all, role-based copilots. So we have them for sales, service, marketing, commerce, developers, and Tableau. It's not just like one assistant like Duet AI, which sort of shows up everywhere and sort of versatile, does everything. It's really specific to the function. And then they have some other ones which are specific to an industry, the financial advisor, the healthcare administrator, automotive service provider, which I was surprised to see, in the college administrator. So that's really interesting just on its own, because they're doing these specialty assistants, not like Intuit doing sort of one assistant for everything. There's some upside to that in that they can tune the model more effectively. But I think it might also be necessary because they're also providing proactivity in some of these copilots. And so if you look at the demos, it's not available yet. So, well, there are people using it in beta, but most of us wouldn't have access to it right now. But when it goes into it, it's actually suggesting things to you. It's looking at the data in your CRM, and it's, if you're a salesperson, they're mentioning something about a client, like they're just on a web page, you should follow up with them. From a service standpoint, giving ideas on how to solve the problem, or creating a way for customers to address their own from a self-service standpoint. I think this is really interesting because this is actually different than what we're seeing elsewhere, where we have these separate assistants and there's this proactive element, which is core to the service.
Yeah, I think it's so funny because I remember having discussions with you, Brett, the last couple of years about how Salesforce has given up on that whole Einstein idea, and now not only
they basically killed it 2 years ago.
Yeah, the idea of certainly on an interactive level, it seemed like it was dead. But not only did they bring it back earlier this year, as we wrote about, but now it's going to be serving so many different roles. It's going to be the power behind customized generative AI assistants. It's very much the sort of central hub for how Salesforce is extending, or I guess infusing generative AI technology throughout all of its products. And there's many big companies have been very enthusiastic about the generative AI. Salesforce has been, I think, very much at or near the top of that list in terms of just the sheer amount of money and resources and effort it's been putting in. And this sort of shows what they've been building toward and where they see the value for their clients. Because again, it's so much of what the bigger companies are doing is not so much about, we can get new clients, so much of it is as saying everyone else is going to be doing this. We have to have the best or the first version of it. And I think Salesforce is really eager to have that proactive element be sort of their standout feature.
Yeah. So I think their vision is it's not only intriguing, I think it's probably right. I think it'll be easier to drive adoption, easier to show value right away. But I will say that I tried to sit through some of the Dreamforce presentations, and I feel like they want to infantilize their customers. I was offended at what they presented to us. I felt like infomercial after midnight on a obscure cable channel, just telling us about how great this is, when they actually have some really cool things to talk about. And maybe it's they feel like, okay, it's, we have developers, but it's mostly sales and marketing. Maybe we don't think they're as smart or grok this space. But I think this is so wrong. I could not watch it. I tried to skip through it. I went back later, I tried to script through it. And I just felt like they had good information in their documentation, good information in their announcements. But the talking heads said nothing interesting.
Yeah, it does feel almost like some of it, honestly, to me, felt like it was designed to be clipped out and shown at a company's orientation about how to use new tools.
Yeah, like an internal meeting. Okay, rah. But come on, stop infantilizing people. Tell them what they need to know. And this is one of the things where Google Cloud Next was actually very good. I mean, now it's developer focused, all these other types of things, but at least they told you things that were really useful. I think Microsoft has done a good job of that recently as well. Maybe I suspect OpenAI will. They have their event coming up.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I mean, to me, honestly, the Einstein branding has always been a little weird. It's like, oh, you're in marketing or sales. Talk to the Nobel Prize winning physicist about how to better sell your product.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, okay, so they might be doing great work. It looks like maybe they're not because of sort of the way they make it too kitschy, but we'll see. I just wonder if the Einstein character they have is going to be the next Clippy. So we'll see. Shout out to Hikam Tahiri. Hikam, great to see you. Probably coming to us from Paris. He joined us. In fact, I'll just do a sidebar on this. We're just at the Unparsed conference in London, run by Tom Hewitson and Kane Sims. And what they were trying to do was recreate, I think it was called Smart Voice Summit, from 2017, must have been 2018 in Paris, that Hikam Tahiri and Smartly AI ran. So shout out to them. They're like great community builders in the space. All right. So keeping in the theme of assistants, Roblox has been talking a lot. They've released a little bit. They've got a new announcement. What happened?
Yeah. Speaking of sometimes odd choices for branding or vision, the Roblox has been very keen on generative AI. Their CEO talked about wanting to make Westworld essentially, but their latest push is again similar to what Einstein is, in that it's about having a copilot, having a character essentially to talk to work out how to build things in Roblox, and then using that AI to create the code, create the objects and experiences. And there's a lot of interest in Roblox because of how it's always been seen as sort of the more user-friendly of the sort of metaverse virtual spaces. And now they're saying you don't have to know how to code, you don't have to know how to do anything. All you need is an idea or maybe an artsy design sense, and you can build the virtual world of your dreams right away.
Well, so for them to have a character like this, for them to do like kitschy stuff, sort of makes sense. It's a gaming company, and their user base is primarily children. Certainly there's adults, there's other things that are on there. There's a lot of adults who are developers, but like the user, it's predominantly skewed children, and they're trying to get their user base up to speed on this, and they want them to create new things. It's like one of their growth hacks that they've had. And so that makes total sense to me to do it. But it's one character, correct? Or it's just like one assistant. It's not like assistants.
Yeah, the Roblox assistant is there to it's a really enhanced version of a chatbot in that sense, where and no matter who you are, you can say, oh, I want to do this, how can I do this? And there's tools that are essentially text to object, where you describe what you want and it will build it for you. Or if you have some coding experience, you can say, I put together this little bit of code, I don't know how to complete it, and it will do that for you. But again, with a very immediate 3D world reaction. It's not building something similar. It's ephemeral in the sense of not being physical, of course, but it's, you describe something, you see it, you interact with it, you put it out in the world, other people can interact with it. That's exciting and interesting. And as you say, it's comes from a gaming background, but once you understand how to build a game, you can build basically any software.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by it. I think it's going to be great. We'll see your move, Unity. All right, so next up, we have this other story, and we want to bring Adobe to the stage. Adobe Firefly is here. Now, Adobe Firefly is interesting. We just talked about two companies that have launched assistants. These are assistants. These are copilots for people using their platforms to create new things or to run their business. And then Adobe comes out with Firefly, which we've talked about in the past, but now it's like general availability. And it is not an assistant. It's a prompt box. It's a prompt box everywhere. It's got a lot of really cool features. I'm not saying that that's bad. I think it's kind of intriguing that there's like, okay, our people, all they need is another tool on the toolbar.
Yeah, I mean, Adobe's always been that way in the sense that, Photoshop, you can do very basic, cropping and changing the brightness and be done with it. Or you can dive in and really do an astonishing amount of visual editing, and this builds on exactly that. I mean, if you want to make a fun, cool, image for a website, all you have to do is type in, astronaut on a llama. I assume it's what the prompt was there. But if
I did, I want to get credit for that. Astronaut on a llama and a mountain trail that I created. I'm not going to tell you all the secrets to my prompt. It was pretty special. I know a little bit how to use these systems. But I'll tell you, well, I was trying to I'm trying to mix some of the themes that we've seen. It used to be, what did we say? Astronaut bears.
Astronauts, teddy bears. Yeah.
And there was one other thing that was like sort of big a year ago. It's like everything that was out there. So I wanted to sort of mix that because like llama's new, astronauts old. We're sort of bringing the old with the new together. There's a couple other things I thought were really interesting about this. So first of all, it's got a Mid-Journey vibe, maybe a Mid-Journey from like last fall. This is built on NVIDIA, like same stuff that powers Picasso. At least those are the original models. They might be modified now. And it's good. It's very good. It's kind of like Mid-Journey was. It did pretty well with the llama. If people don't know this, if you haven't used text to image a lot, those 4 legs are a real problem if you're doing horses, dogs, llamas. And I would say about half of them had a problem with the legs. Some of them had problems with the astronauts' legs, things like that as well. But mostly not. And so it would have been worse a year ago on any of the platforms. And so I think that's like a significant step up. The quality is super good, particularly if you're doing refined, you're doing photorealism or art. The detail is excellent. And then the other thing I think is like intriguing about this, aside from the fact that it's basically free, is you think about like who they compete with. And there's a lot of ways to sort of think about this. But, it's really the Canvas of the world. It's not Mid-Journey so much. People can use Mid-Journey. They can then bring that into Photoshop and Illustrator, InDesign and Premiere and Final Cut and all those other types of things. But I think this is really just a competition, or it's a feature against Canva, against Pixar, against the other companies that have these free offerings or freemium offerings that are trying to peel away part of Adobe's audience.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. With Adobe, I mean, as we've written about with Firefly and some of their other work, I mean, they have, again, there's a very basic, here's a text box, write something in and you'll get an image, or you can go really deep. And then there's the video facet of it. There's so much that Adobe is already starting to offer, and they're bringing it to a wider and wider audience. And Firefly is definitely part of that. And, I agree. It does have that sense of like, experimenting that was part of the very early Mid-Journey story, which, it's sort of grown beyond. But for Adobe, there are a lot of people who use Adobe once a week, once a month, and that's all they need. And having that feature there might make them use it more, or might make them feel happy about it. But there are a lot of people who like the way Adobe works, who maybe want to experiment with synthetic images. And now, instead of having to try to figure out a new website or go to some of the other places we talked about, like Ideogram, all they have to do is go into their friendly, familiar Adobe setup and type in something in a text box, and they will have no trepidation about engaging with that.
It's funny. I pay for Adobe. We use it all the time, but I use Canva more often because it's just faster.
That's every designer friend I have says Adobe is great if you have a lot of complex work to do, but Canva is for when you want to do things that are clean and quick.
Exactly. And the thought was that that this might come to Figma as well. Sort of like there's that whole thing. David Urbanek is saying, hey, David, availability in Express is also noteworthy. Yes, availability in Express is noteworthy, is like sort of the Canva alternative. And I haven't really spent much time with that. I think I will now. But I will say that I've used the free generation of images on Canva before. I don't use PixArt, but it's like fairly similar. And it's okay. I don't know that I've used that many of them, but it's good. It is convenient to have it there. I will say that the fact that the images in Firefly are free, like you get 1,000 credits, and I haven't really figured out exactly what a credit is, but I think a credit's just like one image.
I think it depends on the complexity of the prompt.
That's true. Well. Yeah, that's true. The prompt, and then the layout. There's some other factors in there, the level of detail, resolution. Although the resolution is something they're going to be working on. But in any event, like I will start using that more. I've been using Bing Create a lot. That's also very quick. It's faster than Mid-Journey for me. And sometimes if you just want something quick and dirty, that's really good. Bing Create is like DALL-E 3. I think that I'm going to be proven right on that when that comes out. So the ability in Express, I think, is really important from that. Okay, hey folks, we're going to do winners and losers of the week in just a couple minutes. If you do have winners in generative AI or losers in generative AI for this week or this month. Just throw them in the chat. We'll try to get to those as well. I did want to hit a couple more stories before we got there. Let's move on to Anthropic. And so, Claude Pro, Anthropic's new paid version. It's like ChatGPT Plus. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Anthropic, big, I guess, rival to OpenAI in terms of getting a lot of investment and building up their Claude chatbot as an alternative to ChatGPT. And this essentially is, it's the ChatGPT Plus version, Claude Pro, $20 a month. It's faster, it's more accurate. It doesn't change the model access the way that ChatGPT Plus does. Everyone still has access to Claude 2, which came out earlier this year. But what it does is it makes it possible to get more. There's no limits on how you use it. There's more opportunities to integrate it into other systems. It's really an enhancement. And again, at $20 a month, they're basically saying like, hey, spend a little bit of money. You'll find out how much you really like it, and you're going to want to work with us to make Claude and Anthropic's technology part of your business, part of your daily life. It's their way into the sort of more high end, or I guess money spending market in generative AI.
Yeah, Claude's very good. If you haven't tried it, I recommend people do.
I'm a fan.
yeah, it's really excellent. I really, the summarization feature, that large context window, like, should not be underestimated how useful that is.
It changes a lot. It makes it a lot easier for. I enjoy reading scientific papers, but it's amazing how much summarizing a scientific paper improves my understanding of it when I use Claude.
And what a lot of people don't realize is how small the context window is in ChatGPT and some of the other solutions. You don't really realize it sometimes until like you find a problem, or until you try Anthropic and you say, oh, here's what happens when you can do, 100,000 tokens.
Yep. And data analysis as well has been really helpful.
Yes, exactly. And I've used some of that, although I won't say that it's always reliable.
No, it's, as always, you need
even within the context window, it doesn't sometimes because it tries to turn everything to a text file, and sometimes it doesn't understand things are separate, things like that. But I think it's really interesting. Hey, I'm Brett Kinsella, founder of VoiceBot.ai and Synthedia. Thanks for joining us today. This is Eric Schwartz, my colleague at VoiceBot.ai, the head writer there. We do this every week, Generative AI News Rundown. We have just another story I want to hit on really quickly, something that you wrote. Oh, by the way, if you're out there and you haven't done it yet, please give us a like on YouTube or LinkedIn. Share this with folks. Let people know we're out here, because this is really fun, and make comments or if you have them. Okay, so Google mandates deepfake generative AI disclaimers in political ads ahead of 2024 election. What's happening here?
Yeah, so if you've been paying attention to, there's no such thing as an off month anymore, I guess, in political cycles, but there's been a noticeable uptick in the use of fake deepfakes and synthetic images and videos and audio. And it's not that there's never been, attempts at faking what people are doing or saying, or, manipulating images with standard Adobe kinds of tools, but the ease with which you can make a deepfake image that looks super real is changing the discussion. And in this case, it means that Google wants to avoid any accusations of libel or slander or anything like that. So if you're going to do a political ad, if you're a political campaign, and you're going to use any of those deepfake tools, you're certainly allowed to, but you have to have a disclaimer saying, yes, this is not a real image of my opponent eating a baby. It's entirely fake, which is understandable, but leaves a lot of loopholes at the same time.
Additionally, it's permissible, right, because of the legal protections around political speech, and this idea of disclaimers. And we'll see how that goes. I'm sure there will be some small wars on that, but it could very well be as well that everyone's just going to fall. All the other platforms that allow ads are going to fall in line and just do what Google does as well. And that's not a bad thing. Good actors are going to follow this. I think there's bad actors out there who will not follow the rules. And so you still, as a citizen, should be discerning about anything you consume on the internet. Okay, let's go to winners and losers of the week. I'm going to go with a loser this week, and I'm going to say it is Apple. And I just want to do this because it's fun to talk about Apple. You and I talk about them all the time. We have this running joke how the information is the PR department for Apple. They always have some headline saying, "Oh yes, Apple's doing something really cool in generative AI too. They just don't talk about it." And it's kind of fawning in terms of the coverage from time to time, but I take everything with the Apple with a grain of salt. They sort of just do their own thing. Oh, 16 people were working on this one foundation model. Okay, that's like not significant. Now, the fact that maybe they're spending $1 million a day, if that's true, maybe that's significant. But yeah, there's not much going on over there. They sell a lot of iPhones. Those work really well. Generates a lot of cash for them.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, sometimes the terms that we use are not precise or are inexact in some ways. I mean, Sam Altman himself has said that he doesn't like the term generative AI. But it sounds like Apple doesn't use AI and everything, but it basically has a huge presentation and talks about so many different things, and the times it uses the term AI, let alone generative AI, is minimal and only in reference to like very small or sort of behind the scenes improvements. Compare that to the most recent like Google or Amazon presentations, and it's like coming from another world or from another time period.
All right, who's your loser for the week?
I'm going to have to say all of the executives from so many generative AI companies who had to go to Washington, D.C. and try to explain advanced technology to lawmakers who are often still suspicious of writing their own emails, let alone this kind of technology. And while I do genuinely applaud the idea that they're signing pledges about ethical development and use of generative AI, the fact of the matter is that defining the technology is not something that's been accomplished, let alone defining ethical development of it. So
Yes.
I feel like it's a lot of for them a long waste of time.
Anybody that has to go to Washington and brief senators or congressmen probably should be the loser,
especially on advanced technology.
Yeah, it's not usually not a great experience. So who's your winner this week? And Bob Belly Shetty says, "Don't say NVIDIA is the winner again." Because they've been a winner probably more than anybody. But I know you're not.
I haven't even gotten to this one of these stories yet, but going to say the winner is people who have a lot of extra junk in their house, because as we talked about last week, eBay has made it so that you can basically take a picture and turn that into a listing. And now Amazon is putting out their own generative AI tools for writing product descriptions. So suddenly, if you have all these used items or things that might be valuable but are just a hassle to try to put together and explain online, suddenly it's a lot easier to sell.
People with junk are benefiting from it. Geez, like talk about the reach of this technology.
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing. So Bali, I will not say NVIDIA is the winner this week, although like it's pretty easy.
They're the winner of the year, I would say.
They're always the winner. I think that's what all roads lead to NVIDIA these days. But I am going to say it's related to NVIDIA. I think the cloud service providers are the big winners, because that Tensor LLM software that doubles the basically the throughput capacity of the H100 chips makes it's open source, right? So everyone can use it free of charge. They basically are doubling the capacity of the infrastructure they already have. They can now start to offer more compute time to the customers who've been queuing up for that. And so I'd say like anyone building a foundation model is going to benefit from that, but the cloud providers in particular, because they're going to take in additional revenue just based on the stuff that they've already bought. And one of the engineering leads that gave us a briefing last week from NVIDIA, he said that basically that's the goal. Every time that they put out a new chip, their expectation is to double the performance. And I think the Grace Hopper, they think when it comes out, it's going to be about 17% more efficient than the existing maximum performance of the chip. And so we expect that to go up maybe twice again, because that's typically their approach. But everybody else is going to do that. Eric Schwartz, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hickam, Dave, Bali, all the folks who made comments, thank you very much as well. This has been the Generative AI News Rundown. Read all these stories on Synthedia. Go to bit.ly/Synthedia and voicebot.ai. Read all the stories there too. Hope to see you all next week. And if you joined late and you want to watch the whole thing, it's on YouTube. You can watch it on LinkedIn, but it's easier to find it through our YouTube channel to watch it afterwards. All right, folks. Bye-bye.